Palestinians across southern Gaza had been told by Israel that the so-called Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone was the safest place in the strip for them to go. As a result, tens of thousands of displaced people had pitched tents and shelters on the narrow strip of coast west of Khan Yunis. But on Saturday, Israel's military bombed them. The first missiles hit the camp early in the morning as families were waking up their children or preparing slim breakfasts from rations. According to witnesses, over the course of 5 minutes, a volley of missiles hit 2 tent encampments containing at least 100 tents each. Each of those tents, in turn, was said to contain families of 7 or 8 people. The devastating impact of the attack was immediate. According to Gazan health authorities, over 300 people were injured, with more than 90 people killed in the assault. Half of the dead are thought to be women and children, with witnesses describing bodies and body parts scattered across the sand. But even those trying to save the injured were not safe. These videos were shot in Al-Mawasi on Saturday. The New York Times has analysed that footage, and they've concluded that there was a separate Israeli strike aimed at clearly labelled emergency responders tending to those who were hurt. And when the injured did make it to the nearby Nasser hospital, overwhelmed medical staff struggled to treat them. Nasser hospital medical spokesperson Mohammed Saka described the condition to Reuters.
Most of the cases are in a very critical situation. Among them, there were nearly 50 dead bodies. Many cases are in the operation theater right now. We have called for help. Now we are unable inside the hospital to deal with any more cases because all the hospital beds are full. In addition, the floors of the hospital are full of cases on the ground. The situation is very miserable.
On Sunday, Israel claimed that the strike had succeeded in killing one senior Hamas commander, so that's one commander for 90 civilian deaths. But the IDF is thought to have had a bigger target in mind. Mohammed Daif is head of Hamas's military wing and is said to have planned the 7th of October attack on Israel. And the IDF has said there is a, quote, high probability that he was killed in Saturday's attack, which deployed several tons of bunker-busting bombs in a densely populated humanitarian zone. For its part, Hamas denies that Daif was killed, and the chief military commander has a record of surviving attempts on his life, having escaped at least 7 previous assassination bids. In a separate strike on Sunday, Israel also bombed a school in Novara refugee camp. The UN-run Abu Ghraib school was being used for shelter by hundreds of displaced Palestinian families when it was hit. According to Gaza's civil defense unit, at least 17 people were killed in the attack, with a further 80 injured. Once again, the majority of the dead and injured are thought to be women and children. Israel says the attack, quote, struck a number of terrorists who were operating in the area of UNRWA's Abu Ghraib school. No evidence supporting that claim was provided. The Novara school is just the latest in a string of IDF attacks on Palestinian schools, with 5 bombed across the enclave in just 8 days, leading Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Hassam Zomlot, to post this: massacres every day, everywhere in Gaza. Today, Israel bombs yet another UN school sheltering families in Nusrat refugee camp. Dozens killed and wounded. This is the result of Israel's impunity and international inaction. When Zomlot refers to international inaction there, he means the West, including the UK. And despite a change in government, it's unclear whether Britain's approach to the mass slaughter in Gaza will see any change. Brand new Foreign Secretary David Lammy is visiting Israel, where he has met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and posing for this photo, shaking hands. Speaking about his meetings, Lammy said this: the death and destruction in Gaza is intolerable. This war must end now, with an immediate ceasefire complied with by both sides. The fighting has got to stop. The hostages still cruelly detained by Hamas terrorists need to be released immediately, and aid must be allowed in to reach the people of Gaza without restrictions. That represents a very slight change in tone from Lammy's Tory predecessors, but it's not clear how effective these calls will be without some kind of leverage to back them up. And in fact, it now appears that Starmer's government is going out of its way to shield Israeli leaders from international law. According to an Israeli newspaper, the Labour government has backtracked on a decision to drop the UK's objection to International Criminal Court arrest warrants being considered for Netanyahu and Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Back in May, the ICC prosecutor announced he was applying to the court for the arrest warrants, accusing Netanyahu and Gallant of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. The then Tory government issued a formal legal challenge to the warrants, arguing that the ICC had no jurisdiction over the Palestinian territories. According to Labour officials, the party objected to the Tories' legal intervention at the time. But according to international human rights lawyer Jeffrey Robertson KC, the incoming Labour government came under pressure from the US to continue to try to block the ICC's arrest warrants by not withdrawing the Tories' objection. If the Israeli report is correct, and if Labour is pressing ahead with the legal challenge against the ICC, it looks like Lammy is posturing for a ceasefire while at the same time doing everything he can to take the pressure off those overseeing this brutal war. David Adler, I mean, that image of David Lammy sort of shaking hands with Netanyahu raised lots of eyebrows on Twitter. His defenders said he also sort of had a handshake with the leaders of the Palestinian Authority. I mean, of course, in this war, I would say that the corollary of Netanyahu is Hamas, not the PA, who don't have anything to do with the war. And I don't think David Lammy would sort of stand shaking a Hamas leader's hand and sort of smiling at the camera. So it's worth asking, why is he so comfortable doing the same with Netanyahu? What do you make of this? And I suppose the first elements of Labour's policy we've seen when it comes to Israel and Palestine.
It's the kind of photo that you would have expected a leader like David Lammy to make in October. It's the kind of photo that you might have understood him to make when there was a real prospect of approaching a ceasefire settlement, and when we had not witnessed now approaching 9-10 months of some of the most horrendous destruction and outright genocide on our phone screens every morning, day and night. To go blithely, even with a set of objectives or a series of tweets in hand, to sit with Netanyahu and give him the satisfaction, it must be said, of the diplomatic support provided to him by the recently coronated British foreign minister. That is the real crime of political vision. And as much as I'm sure David Lammy is convinced that this was a gesture, not just of goodwill, but of peacemaking, its presentation to the stakeholders who really matter understand it as a little more than an endorsement, a little more than a blank check for further impunity. And the records that you've read out tell that story in terrifying detail of Labour's own plans to pave the way for Israeli impunity, despite its previous statements on the importance of delivering justice for war crimes, whether it be Russian or Israeli in nature. And I am astounded by the tone deafness of this media stunt by the new foreign minister. Perhaps I shouldn't be. But at the same time as we're witnessing sustained civilian slaughter, for this to be the move, absent a larger strategy, absent a stronger and more multilateral push, when it was clearly a simple gesture by a foreign minister at the outset of his mandate to show face and look serious, that I think is a very dangerous foreshadowing sign of what might be to come in terms of the politics of posturing versus the politics of delivering on an agenda of peace for the world.
And they say they adopt the ideology of progressive realism. So they're always trying to change the world for the better, but realizing where they do and don't have power, and sort of a photo op shaking hands with Netanyahu while defending him in the International Criminal Court is a funny old interpretation of such a doctrine. I think it was a meaningless doctrine to begin with, but there we are. David Adler, thank you so much for joining me tonight on a very busy news day.
Pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
We'll speak to you soon, I'm sure. Thank you, everyone, for watching this evening. Come back on Monday. Well, today was Monday, wasn't it? Come back tomorrow for another live stream from 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.